Ferrari's Monaco disaster was not just a crash. It was the moment one red car hit the wall, another red car reached the podium, and the whole team suddenly had a problem too big to hide. Charles Leclerc was racing at home in a Ferrari fast enough to fight, with a podium slipping into view. Then everything changed. The crash red flagged the race, the pressure exploded, and the investigation now points toward the question Ferrari fears most. Was this really driver error, or did Leclerc's Ferrari fail him when he needed it most? Because this is the detail that changes everything. Leclerc had already been warning about the brakes. Ferrari already had a different solution on the other side of the garage. And while Lewis Hamilton finished second, Leclerc was left explaining why his car would not stop the way he expected. One Ferrari looked like the future. The other exposed the danger hiding inside it. And if the FIA investigation confirms what the data already suggests, Monaco may not be remembered as Leclerc's mistake. It may be remembered as the day Ferrari's fastest car became their biggest problem. Subscribe to the channel. Monaco is not just a race. It is a pressure chamber with walls. Every corner feels like it was designed to punish doubt. Every braking zone asks the driver a question before the car has even slowed down. Do you trust this machine completely, or are you already thinking about the barrier? That is why Charles Leclerc's crash became so much bigger than one impact. Because in Monaco, a crash is never just a crash. It tells people something. Sometimes it tells them the driver pushed too hard. Sometimes it tells them the tires were gone. Sometimes it tells them the race had turned desperate. But this time, the message was more uncomfortable because the warning signs were already there before the wall ever arrived. Leclerc was not driving some slow, hopeless Ferrari. That is what makes the story so dangerous for Maranello. The SF26 had pace. Real pace. Enough pace to make Ferrari believe they had arrived in Monaco with something powerful. Enough pace to put the team in the conversation at the front. Enough pace to make the weekend feel like a chance to change the mood around the entire season. And for Leclerc, that mattered more than usual. Because this was home. Not just a home race in the ordinary sense. Not just a driver racing in front of familiar fans. For Charles, Monaco carries something heavier. It is the place where every year feels like a promise waiting to be fulfilled, and every disappointment feels more personal than the last. The streets know him. The fans know him. The cameras know exactly where to look when something goes wrong. And that is why Ferrari's speed at the start of the weekend felt so important. It gave people permission to believe again. It created the kind of dangerous hope that follows Leclerc around Monaco every season. Maybe this time the story would finally be different. Maybe this time the Ferrari would be strong enough. Maybe this time the home hero would not leave with another painful chapter. But here is the problem. A fast car can hide a weakness for a while. At Monaco, it cannot hide it forever. The first concern was not the lap time. The first concern was trust. Leclerc had already been talking about braking discomfort. He had already been feeling something strange in the car. Not something small enough to ignore, and not something easy to explain away once the weekend turned serious. And braking discomfort in Monaco is not a detail. It is a threat. Think about what a driver is doing there. He is not simply driving around a circuit. He is threading a car through streets that leave almost no space for correction. He is aiming at corners that seem too narrow for the speed he is carrying. He is braking later than the brain wants to believe is possible because the car is supposed to obey. That final word matters. Obey. A Formula One driver can live with a difficult car. He can live with a car that moves around. He can live with a car that needs discipline, patience, or precision. But he cannot live with a car that does not answer the same way twice. That is where confidence begins to break. And once confidence breaks in Monaco, everything changes. The driver does not suddenly become slow. It is more subtle than that. He starts protecting himself in tiny ways. A few meters earlier on the brake. A little less commitment on entry. A small hesitation where before there was instinct. A corner that should feel automatic begins to feel like a question. And questions are dangerous when the wall is waiting. This is why the early signs around Leclerc mattered so much. Ferrari had pace, but Charles did not have total comfort. The car could deliver lap time, but underneath that performance was a braking feeling that did not give him the calm he needed. And in Monaco, calm is not softness. Calm is speed. The calm driver is the one who can attack. The uncertain driver is the one who starts losing the car before the crash ever happens. That is what made the whole Ferrari weekend feel like a contradiction. On one side, the team had reasons to be excited. The car was strong in the kind of corners that expose a weak chassis. It looked sharp enough to fight. It looked like Ferrari had brought a machine capable of putting pressure on the front. On the other side, Leclerc was carrying a warning. And that warning did not disappear just because the stopwatch looked good. If anything, the pace made the warning more dangerous. Because a slow car tells the driver to be careful. A fast car tempts him to believe. A slow car says, survive this. A fast car says, go and take what should be yours. That is the trap Monaco set for Ferrari. Leclerc had a car fast enough to chase the result, but not a car he fully trusted in the one area where trust matters most. And when the race began to move toward the final phase, the pressure on that weakness grew. Every lap brought the podium closer. Every lap made the result feel more real. Every lap made the cost of failure heavier. And then, suddenly, the story Ferrari wanted began to split in two. Lewis Hamilton was doing exactly what Ferrari needed from him. He was delivering. He was keeping the car clean. He was turning the promise of the SF26 into something visible on the result sheet. His race gave Ferrari proof that the car could survive Monaco and finish at the sharp end. When a driver blames himself, the story is painful but contained. When a driver points toward the car, the story spreads. It moves from the cockpit to the garage. From the garage to the factory. From one mistake to a chain of decisions. And the chain is what Ferrari now has to face. There had been discomfort before. There had been a known concern. There had been a different braking direction on the other side of the garage. And there had been a decision to race at Monaco with a configuration Leclerc felt he understood, even though that familiar choice may not have been the safer one. That is the cruelest part of the story. Leclerc did not choose chaos. He chose familiarity. At Monaco, that is usually what drivers want. They want a car they recognize. They want a brake pedal that feels known. They want responses that match the body's memory, because there is no time to discover a surprise between walls. But sometimes familiarity becomes a trap. Sometimes the setup you know is the setup that has already been warning you. Sometimes the solution that feels risky before the race is the one that prevents the disaster during it. And that is the question Ferrari cannot escape. Was the answer already sitting on Hamilton's side of the garage? Because if Hamilton's configuration gave more stability, and Leclerc's did not, then this crash becomes more than a driver's painful Monaco moment. It becomes a Ferrari management issue. A technical decision. A risk that was understood too late. This is where the investigation becomes important. Not as a dramatic headline. As a search for the truth underneath the impact. The crash red flagged the race, but the red flag was only the visible part. The real red flag may have been in the brake data. In the rear axle behavior. In the comparison between two Ferrari configurations. In the question of whether the car did what the driver expected when the race was at its most delicate point. Because if Leclerc pressed the pedal and the car did not respond the way it should, then the wall was not the beginning of the story. It was the end of a warning Ferrari had already received. And that is what makes this so tense. Ferrari have to investigate without destroying trust. They have to protect Leclerc without ignoring Hamilton's success. They have to admit the car has a weakness without making the entire project look fragile. They have to move quickly toward a solution without making one driver feel blamed for choosing the wrong path. That is a very difficult balance, because Leclerc needs answers, not comfort. He needs to know why the car behaved the way it did. He needs to know whether the braking issue is gone. He needs to know whether the next time he attacks a corner, the Ferrari will stop exactly when his body expects it to. Without that, the problem follows him. Not loudly, quietly, into the next practice session, into the next qualifying lap, into the next time he approaches a heavy braking zone and has to decide whether to trust the pedal fully. That is how a technical issue becomes psychological. A broken part can be replaced. A broken feeling takes longer. And Ferrari cannot afford to let Leclerc carry that doubt, because the pressure around him is already enormous. Monaco was supposed to be a chance to recover something emotionally. Instead, it became another painful image in a history that already feels unfair. But Ferrari also cannot ignore what Hamilton did. Hamilton finished second. That result matters because it proves the car is not fundamentally lost. It proves Ferrari have a real base. It proves the SF26 can be competitive when the setup, the driver, and the confidence all align. That is why the weekend is so complicated. The car is not slow enough to dismiss. The problem is not small enough to ignore. Ferrari are close enough to dream but exposed enough to panic. And that is the most dangerous place for any top team to be. When a team is far behind, the mission is obvious. Build performance. When a team is close, every weakness becomes urgent. Every missed result feels like a crime. Every internal comparison becomes sharper. Every driver comment carries more weight. Ferrari are now in that zone. Close enough for Hamilton to stand on the podium. fragile enough for Leclerc to crash out at home and point toward a braking problem that cannot be brushed aside. That is why Monaco may become a turning point. Not because of the red flag alone. Not because of the investigation alone. But because the weekend forced Ferrari to see both sides of their car at once. The side that can fight. And the side that can fail. The side that gives Hamilton confidence. And the side that leaves Leclerc demanding answers. The side that makes the project look real. And the side that makes the project look dangerous. Ferrari cannot choose to see only the podium. They cannot choose to see only the crash. They have to understand the connection between them. Because the difference between Hamilton's result and Leclerc's disaster may reveal the exact path Ferrari must take next. If the newer brake configuration is the answer, then it has to become reliable, understandable, and usable for both drivers. Not just faster on paper. Not just better in the data. Usable in the hands of Charles Leclerc when the walls are close and the pressure is unbearable. That is the real test. A solution is not a solution until the driver trusts it. And Leclerc will not trust it because Ferrari tells him to. He will trust it only when the car proves it, lap after lap, in the most stressful moments. That is where Maranello's responsibility begins. The team has to turn this crash into clarity. No excuses. No vague explanations. No hiding behind the fact that Hamilton scored a podium. Because the podium and the crash are part of the same warning. Ferrari have a car with enough performance to hurt their rivals. But if the braking window is too narrow, it can hurt Ferrari first. And in Monaco it already did. So now the question moves beyond the wall. It moves into the next race, into the next braking zone, into the next time Leclerc asks the car for everything. Will the Ferrari answer? Or will Monaco remain in the back of his mind? That is what makes this story impossible for Ferrari to escape. The crash was public. The pain was personal. The investigation is technical. But the consequence is much bigger than all of them. Ferrari must prove that Monaco was a warning they understood, not the beginning of a deeper fracture.